are paintings that record history, and then there are paintings that reshape it. Few images are as bold, dramatic, and politically charged as Napoleon Crossing the Alps by Jacques-Louis David. A rearing horse, a wind-swept cloak, a leader pointing forward, fearless against the elements. It looks like a moment of pure heroism frozen in time. But here's the truth. Almost everything you see in this painting is carefully constructed, not to document reality, but to create a legend. Because the man at the center of it all, Napoleon Bonaparte, understood something very few leaders before him truly grasped. Power isn't just won on the battlefield, it's built in the minds of people, and this painting is one of the greatest examples of visual propaganda ever created. So in this video, we're going deep into the full story behind Napoleon Crossing the Alps, the artist, the history, the symbolism, the political messaging, and why this image still defines how the world imagines Napoleon more than 2 centuries later. Let's begin. To understand this painting, you first need to understand the artist behind it. Jacques-Louis David was not just a painter. He was deeply involved in politics during one of the most turbulent periods in French history, the French Revolution. David was a leading figure in neoclassicism, an art movement inspired by ancient Greece and Rome. Neoclassical art emphasized clarity, order, discipline, and heroic ideals. It rejected the excess and decoration of earlier styles and instead focused on moral strength and civic virtue. David didn't just paint history. He helped shape how history was seen. He created powerful visual narratives that supported political movements and leaders, and eventually he became closely aligned with Napoleon himself. In fact, David would later become Napoleon's official court painter, which means this painting isn't just art, it's messaging. Now let's talk about the moment this painting claims to depict. In May of 1800, Napoleon led his army across the Alps through the Great St. Bernard Pass. This was part of a bold military strategy during the War of the Second Coalition. The goal was to surprise Austrian forces in Italy. Crossing the Alps was no small feat. The terrain was brutal, the weather was unforgiving, the journey was dangerous, but here's where the myth begins to separate from reality. Napoleon did make the crossing, but he didn't do it like this. He didn't charge dramatically on a rearing horse. In reality, he crossed the mountains on a mule, calm, controlled, practical, not exactly the image of cinematic heroism you see in the painting. And yet, David chose to depict something entirely different, because accuracy wasn't the goal, impact was. Napoleon Crossing the Alps was painted in 1801, with multiple versions completed by 1803. The version most people recognize today was created during this period. Interestingly, Napoleon himself never posed for the painting. Instead, David worked from imagination, previous portraits, and instructions. Napoleon reportedly gave one key directive: make me calm on a fiery horse. That contrast is important. The horse is wild, energetic, almost uncontrollable. But Napoleon sits firmly in control, unshaken, composed, commanding. It sends a clear message. Even in chaos, he is in control. Now, look closer at the details. Napoleon's cloak whips dramatically through the wind. The horse rears upward, muscles tense. The entire composition is diagonal, creating movement and urgency. Nothing feels still. Everything pushes forward. Napoleon himself points ahead, directing both his army and the viewer's gaze. It's not just a gesture, it's symbolism. He is leading not just soldiers, but history itself. And then there's one of the most subtle yet powerful details in the painting. Carved into the rocks beneath the horse are names Hannibal, Carolus, Magnus, Bonaparte. These refer to Hannibal, the Carthaginian general who crossed the Alps during the Second Punic War, and Charlemagne, the medieval emperor who shaped much of Europe, and now Napoleon places himself among them. It's a visual statement of legacy, a claim that he belongs in the same category as some of the greatest leaders in history. That's not accidental, that's branding. From a technical perspective, the painting is a masterpiece of neoclassical style. David uses clean lines, strong contrasts, and idealized forms, unlike the rough, emotional brushwork of artists like Van Gogh. David's technique is controlled and precise. The lighting highlights Napoleon as the central figure, almost like a spotlight. The background is rugged and chaotic, but he remains visually dominant. The colors are also intentional. Napoleon's uniform is crisp and detailed. The golden tones and deep reds emphasize power, authority, and prestige. Even the horse, though chaotic, is beautifully sculpted. Everything in the painting serves the same purpose, to elevate Napoleon beyond a man, into a myth. And that brings us to the bigger question. Why was this painting created? Simply put, propaganda, but not in the crude sense people often imagine. This is sophisticated propaganda. It doesn't just tell you Napoleon is great, it makes you feel it. At the time, Napoleon was consolidating power in France. He had risen rapidly through the military and political ranks, and images like this helped solidify his authority. Most people would never see him in person, but they would see this. And this is how they would remember him: strong, fearless, almost superhuman. The painting was so effective that multiple versions were created and distributed. It became one of the defining images of his rule, and over time it worked. Even today, when people imagine Napoleon, they often picture something very close to this image. Not the man on a mule, but the leader on a rearing horse pointing toward destiny. Reception of the painting was overwhelmingly positive among supporters of Napoleon. It reinforced his image as a heroic leader. However, modern historians and critics view it with more nuance. They recognize both its artistic brilliance and its role as political messaging. It raises an important question. Where is the line between art and propaganda? Can something be both beautiful and manipulative? Napoleon Crossing the Alps proves that the answer is yes. Today, versions of the painting are housed in major museums, including the Louvre Museum. It remains one of the most studied and reproduced images in Western art, and its influence goes far beyond painting. You can see its DNA in modern political imagery, advertising, film, and media. The idea of crafting a powerful, symbolic image of leadership. That idea is still very much alive today. So why does this painting still matter? Because it reminds us that history is not just written, it's designed. It shows how easily perception can be shaped, how an ordinary moment can be transformed into something legendary, and how art can be used not just to reflect reality, but to control it. More than 2 centuries later, Napoleon Crossing the Alps still stands as a masterpiece of both art and influence. It's not just a painting of a man crossing a mountain. It's a carefully constructed image of power, ambition, and legacy. And whether you admire it or question it, it's impossible to ignore. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the stories behind history's most powerful artworks, subscribe for more episodes exploring the masterpieces that shaped how we see the world.